You want me to wrap the gavel for you?
There you
I
go.
have it. I don't know how I got it. That's a better seat though. I'm like this side.
Okay, all right, are we open? All right, well, we'll open this morning's meeting for the Water Rates Committee. It is 11 o'clock on the nose, so welcome members of the public, members of the committee and staff. I think we'll kind of, we'll jump right into it. Last meeting, we discussed potential opportunity to utilize different pieces of the capital budget to help offset debt service. We talked about, in generalities, because Marvin wasn't here, to talk about, to show us the actual data set that we have built in order to look at the rates in total. And we talked about this idea of going forth and identifying maybe the 5.72 process that the board has already approved in a 3-year period. Next year would be the 2021 third year of that 3-year period to utilize that rate structure. And so today we were going to take a look at some of the opportunities. We have senior staff in the room to discuss some ramifications to 2021 budgets and what that may entail. But we wanted to give the committee the walk through the assumptions of the rates calculator and find out what is it makes sense and is an opportunity to move forward. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to Marvin to talk about the rates calculator, go through the assumptions of what it is. I believe members of the committee have seen this multi-page Excel spreadsheet that we utilize and have utilized in the last couple of years to define rates, and we take a look at all sorts of valuations in terms of our reserve levels, our cash ratios, our debt payments, etc. So it's an all-encompassed document that Marvin and his team have put together.
Good morning, committee, and members of the public staff. The board gave us direction regarding 4 items in the rate study. They gave us direction regarding developer rate using hybrid allocation, meaning associated portions of the cost using the number of accounts, and then associated portions of the cost from the 2020 study. So that was direction. The board gave us direction to try and come up with a rate that recovers 50% of the cost in the base rate and 50% in the commodity rate. The board gave us direction regarding to try to obtain a sustainable level of transfer-ins from the hydroelectric fund, but not to be jumping around. And the board gave us direction regarding the use of property taxes in the model. And so the model assumes all of those assumptions that the board gave us direction to. And so, in that being the case, yes, Chris. So, Chris, I'll have you open the first department schedule, because this department schedule will show how that we've integrated the item 1 regarding using a portion of the cost to allocate.
Can you make it bigger, Chris, please?
You make it a little bit bigger.
Which one?
Yes, yes. You make it a little bit bigger. Perfect. So what this does here is that the model that you're going to be looking at and the way the rates are developed, they are following this guideline. You can see the support department's percentages. So throughout the model, what we're saying here is that 46% of the cost we're projecting is going to be is associated with our support departments. It's also saying 54% of the cost we're projecting is associated with our delivery departments. These are the departments that deliver. On the right, at the very top, what you see is the number of treated water accounts from fiscal year 17 through 19. So we're taking like an average, not just 1 year. And then you see the number of raw water accounts from fiscal year 17 and 19. and it shows you that the percentage of cost of these support departments, we're saying the treated water customers are going to recover 79% of that support cost out 5 years.
Carmen, how did you arrive at that number?
These are the number of accounts. So the treated water accounts,
Oh, so you just took the amount and divided by the percentage?
no, I just took the number of accounts, the average number of accounts from fiscal year 17 to 19, like average, and then the average raw water, and then we just take the percentage.
Yeah.
So treated water amounts to 79% of all of our accounts.
So 16 million is 79% of 21 million.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you.
Yes. Now, the bottom portion, which is the delivery, the cost of service report itself came up with approximately 54% of the delivery costs is associated with the treated water customers. It's the cost of service report. Approximately 46% is the raw water. So we take those percentages, and then we look at the budget portion that amounts to that. And the bottom allocation is what is going to drive the actual cost report. And as we develop the rates, the bottom allocation is going to drive it. What that is saying essentially that the treated water customers are going to account for approximately 65 or 66% of the revenue requirement. And the raw water customers will account for approximately 34%. Right now, the treated water customers account for approximately 75%, and the raw water is about 25%. So if we went with this hybrid structure as directed by the board, we would see the treated water recovery costs come down, and we would see the raw water recovery go up.
So, if I can interrupt here, this is based on, this is not based on a new rate increase. This is based on what actually costs with that scenario plugged in. Am I correct there?
Exactly. This has nothing to do with a rate increase yet.
Right.
This is saying,
this is what it has been working. If we switch it, add the factor in the hybrid,
yes,
then this is how the outcome. Okay.
yes, if we factored in a hybrid, then we would be allowing the treated water customer to recover about 65%, and the raw guy about 34%. If we did not go with this methodology, it would be the same way. Approximately 75, 76 is treated, and approximately 24 is raw. And that's just based upon the number of accounts that we have now. But this study takes into effect the number of accounts and the delivered percentages that we tracked throughout those 3 years. So our cost of service study gave us the 46% allocation over 3 years. And so, but this was direction from the board. So in this particular instance, we can go into the model, and then we can walk through some of the assumptions, and we can show how that we created the model in light of the direction from the board, as well as some of the other percentages. So, yeah, we go into the model. Okay. So the way the model is developed is that the model assumes for fiscal year 2020 that we have 5.72 rate increase. These percentages, obviously, we can change as we look through the model. But first, we'll see the impacts of what we have. Currently, model assumes that we will get the 5.72% increase in 2021. 2022, we left 5.72, and on out, we put 6. These numbers we can change, but we had to put something in there to make the math work. Right. The model is assuming that we will experience 1% demand over the 5 years. What this means is that when we look at the number of accounts that we grew by from 2014 to 2019, we grew at about 0.6, 0.7%. So it makes no sense for me to use a 2% demand growth. In the last 5 years, we grew about 7.7%.
Is that treated and raw combined?
Combined. Okay. And as well as number of accounts, as well as usage. Same thing. So this number significant, because if it's too big, and you're saying that you're going to recover 2-3% in growth in revenue, and then you don't get that growth, it'll hurt the reserves. So it's conservative at 1%.
Hold on, Marvin, you have a question?
Yeah, so 1%, so 0.6% growth across the district, you said both in usage and demand, you said the same thing.
About 0.7.
0.7.
Yes.
And what do you mean by, is 0.7 in usage and in demand?
Yes,
or-
so from about the last 5 years, we've increased our number of accounts by less than 1% a year. So every 5 years, you look at DFWs, people wanting to connect, that are not part of the DFW, just want to connect, other stuff happening, our number of accounts increased about 0.7.
Do we know, and so you're saying you don't know what percentage of that 0.7 is treated water versus raw water?
It wouldn't,
New hookup.
it wouldn't matter because the overall, when we look at the revenue forecast, we're putting a 1% increase on the raw and the tree. And also too, on the demand. So as demand has increased over the last 5 years, we've looked at the usage acre feet over the last 5 years. And so I think it's a conservative number. It's not a number where we want to do too high. It ain't 3%. So we don't want to say that because we're not going to get that much of revenue.
Much more realistic.
There it is, much more realistic.
Yeah.
That's what we've been growing at. The hydroelectric revenues, it's a very realistic number. I spoke to Ken, and Ken believes we will get about 1.5% if everything else is the same. Also, for 2024, we reduced hydroelectric revenues by 20% because we got to do the Chicago Park rewind in 2024. We also reduced it by 11% in 2025. So we don't want to just forecast revenue out when we know we're going to have to do a rewind at some point. So we backed that off as well.
So, on that 1.5%, what's 1.5% of what? I mean, are we?
1.5% of the forecast.
So right now, last year was 13-something million.
So last year forecast we had about 20
Oh, you
some
think
million.
overall hydroelectric,
Hydroelectric
not what
revenues.
they're transferring?
Yeah, not with the transfer. We look at all dollars.
Cash,
Yeah, money.
electric generation,
They're
cash.
assuming electric generation is gonna continue to increase.
We're assuming that it will
1.5%.
increase about 1.5, considering all things, considering all things, power's not gonna go anywhere, even if we have to sell it on a wholesale market that sell, power's gonna be power.
The big bulk of it is the power purchase agreement, that's good for PG&E, that's good for like
20, 30,
Yeah, 20.
30, another 12 years.
12 years, yeah, so that's pretty,
That's what's based on.
Yeah.
We're within that
yeah,
frame,
right.
yeah.
And even if PG&E didn't buy it, we could still sell it wholesale.
Right.
If someone's gonna buy it, this power will go to the grid, someone's gonna buy it. So also property taxes, I increased this percentage because property taxes growth from 14 to 19 had actually been 4.7%. So I increased the percentage to 4 as well as 3. Makes a difference in terms of how much property taxes you'll have, how much you can use for other things. So it's a more realistic number than 3. The other revenues, those guys, connections, reimbursement, these fees type things, I went with a conservative of 4%. It's been growing pretty much, so I went with a 4. The investment income is based upon the unrestricted reserve balance at the end of the prior year, and I'm assuming we will get at least 1.5%. So you looked at the overall unrestricted reserve balance, 60-some million, right? 1.5% on that at the end of the year is what drives that guy there.
I have a question, Marvin. Sure. Back on the other revenue, the 4%, it says includes new connect install. Isn't that capacity charges?
No, these are, and Chip can speak to more of these. These are new connection fees, not capacity charges. There's a lot more fees in there, meter set fee, things like that, that are not capacity charges.
So do the capacity charges typically don't go in the budget, they go, right? They go,
They're restricted.
right?
The capacity charges, we will use. See that line there said capacity fees? We can use capacity charges to service some of the debt. This is the agreement that we had. We also can use it to cover some projects. Gotta be careful with covering operating where you ain't supposed to, you get in trouble. But you can cover it with some projects that meet that capacity fee guideline. So we believe that we will use $2 million in capacity fees over the life of the 5-year forecast, which is significant, because if you don't use that, then obviously someone's got to cover it.
Why is that a fixed number, because we don't know how many new...
Well, we know it's fixed in the sense that we know that we're going to use $218,000 a year for Cement Hill. So Cement Hill that the board approved, about 35% of that loan payment to be used, capacity fees to pay that. So we know that number, that's about $218,000. The rest of it, we estimate with engineering and Doug in terms of whether this project can use capacity fees or not. And that's kind of an estimate. And so those are kind of the expense assumptions driving the model. Obviously, the rates themselves is driving the water rates as well. We looked at the connection demand, that demand about 1%. So we looked at all those revenue assumptions. Now we're going to look at the expense assumptions.
Transfer ins, touch on that, you didn't touch
Oh,
on that.
yeah, transfer ins, hydro would transfer in about $30 million over the 5-year period, which is $6 million. So the model's assuming hydro will do $6 million, and they won't do any more. Obviously, we can change that, but right now, that's what's built in. The assessment district and cap fees, that is to transfer in the assessment fees, because water fund is servicing the debt. So as water pays that state loan, the assessment fees are transferred into the water fund, and they are put in a tax roll every year for property taxes, and they're paid back to water fund. We didn't put any operating grants in there. Those are, I mean, you can get them sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So, but we will put some in there for 2021 because we know we're going to put some in the budget. I just didn't put any in out 5 years. So those are the revenue assumptions there. And as we change those assumptions, you will see the resulting financial change. So the expense assumptions. These are assumptions, and these things here, they definitely impact reserves. Right now, the model assumes a 1.5% COLA over the forecast, over the 5-year period. It also assumes that we will get 2.5% merits annually as people step throughout their career. So as people step throughout their career, as a district whole, it is about a 2.5% increase. Just people just stepping through their career. And so that's the salary level. The non-PERS benefit, 4%. I talked to Jan on this a little bit. I backed this off to 4% because of COLA and other issues. I used to have this up at 7 or 8% for medical increases, but I can't see it happening like that over 5 years in the midst of COVID. It can't go up like that.
What defines non-PERS benefits?
Non-PERS is healthcare, your healthcare benefit.
What, aren't PERS, don't we have a healthcare?
No, but it's, a non-PERS in this instance is non-retirement. Yes, we do get PERS medical. So in this instance there where I'm saying non-PERS, I probably should have just said non-retirement, non-CalPERS retirement.
Or employee benefits.
Yeah, non-CalPERS. So CalPERS does two things for us. They handle our retirement, which is our net pension liability, the $50 million, and they also administer our health care, which is medical insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So in this model where I'm saying benefits non-PERS, Chris, maybe you can just type non-retirement. So over there, non-retirement. Yeah. And then you can do that same thing if you want to, and underneath expenditures, in the label, just put non-retirement, something like that. Because this here is the benefit, but this chunk of forecasting, these benefits together, it doesn't include retirement. So what we're saying that all other benefits other than PERS, retirement, is gonna go up 4% annually.
And retirement's the next line, right?
But now, retirement's the next line, and we got specific percentages for those guys.
Right, and can you translate that, off the top of your head, the dollar, actual dollars from 20 to 21? Because I know they're pretty large last year. Or that's another sheet, if I look at it.
Well, once we get to the financials, we'll be able to see
Actual.
the actual dollars.
Yeah, okay.
And so, right now, we're seeing about 35% of salaries.
Every year increasing by that percentage.
No. That is the percentage. So for 2021, the percentage of salaries is 34.7. For 2025, it's 35, So it's increasing. You can see every year it's increasing by 1, 3, 2, 1. It's increasing small, but the percentages are already huge of your salary.
They are.
So the percentage increase is very small, but it's significant. And then we're gonna fund our OPEB over the 5-year period. We'll fund our OPEB to about $2.2 million. OPEB is the other employee retirement benefit. This is the healthcare retirement. So as retirees,
Is this other one, the line above it, just is
Yeah.
retirement?
Yes, that's just retirement. These are the retirees.
This is, so the previous line was pre-retirement, with what percentage of the existing, workers' salaries are their retirement
Mm-hmm.
component, and the bottom one is what we're paying to our retirees.
Yeah, and you can say OPEB trust. So where I see OPEB, you can put benefits OPEB trust, TRUST, because this is us funding our OPEB trust. And so underneath that, yes, that's our OPEB trust. Good thing about the OPEB trust is that once we finish funding it, you can take all of that money and you can use that money annually to pay all your PERS premiums.
How far are we from something that's
We're within 10 years. It's like maybe 9-point-some years. And then the fully trust will be funded. And so you can just use that essentially to pay your bills for like 20-some years if that's the board's decision. And then the O&M portion. This was I believe this was a fair percentage. I used to run O&M at 3 to 4% because CPI was about 3 to 4%. Now with COVID, I'm pretty sure over the next 5 years, our normal CPI is going to be about 1 to 1.5%. At the most. Yeah, it's got to slow down. All the unemployment coming in, and it can't keep going up.
So that's the growth rate of how much it costs to maintain our facilities?
This is the growth rate in just the normal cost of goods. So as we purchase inventory, as we fill up our tanks, as we just go buy groceries and stuff like that. This is our normal inflation index as a whole. It can't be more than this because of COVID and unemployment. It can't be more than that over that 5-year period. The debt service, we will service about $32 million in debt over the 5-year period. Fixed assets, same CPI rate as the O&M, same CPI rate, 1.5%. Transfer outs, this is just the opposite of transfer ins. Hydro will be doing this for water and recreation.
So fixed assets, we're going to increase our supply of fixed assets by 1.5% a year?
And that's a good question. The level of fixed assets, we will stay at the 2020 level, and the inflation on that will be 1.5%. So in other words, whatever we budget, the level at 2020, like if we budget $1.5 million or whatever, we'll stay at that level. However, that level will increase by 1.5% just by the cost of inflation. Yeah.
And remind us again what
Fixed assets, purchasing your trucks, vehicles, yeah. Not capital projects, fixed assets.
Okay.
Yeah. Capital projects is next, and capital projects is what we anticipate doing over 5 years. Doug is going to look at that in a little bit more detail as he goes into the engineering committee. The model does have us funding a huge portion of our capital projects by issuing new debt. And then, and as we get into the model, the new debt assumes that we can issue around 2024. And it also assumes, once we issue that new debt, servicing the debt and what it does to our debt service coverage ratio. So we couldn't say over the next 5 years, we're not going to have to issue any debt. We couldn't really say that
Right.
because we know huge projects are coming up. So the model assumes that.
And so this $120 million is what we've spent on capital projects over the last 5 years.
No, no.
No, no,
What we
projected.
anticipate spending over the next 5 years.
And this is always confusing to me, because the money for capital projects comes from different pots, right? It's not a budget item, but the debt services,
The debt service is a budget
debt service
item.
has to be included in the budget, that's why we're not adding $121 million to our budget,
No, no, no.
coming from
It'll be,
other pots, right?
yeah, the capital project will be funded through property taxes,
Right?
and we're saying we're gonna fund it by $77 million in new debt. Of that $77 million in new debt, the debt will be serviced throughout the 5-year period from rate repairs and from some property taxes.
I'll assume that one of these is Scott's Flats building.
If you click on that project that says, click on the one that says new debt, so there you go, Chris, click on the tab that says new debt, the tab, the bottom of the page.
Thank you.
That tab there,
There we go.
yeah, kind of shows you the projects that we perhaps believe we can fund with debt over the projections.
Scroll down to
Chris, bring it in.
Yeah, 77. We're gonna do more projects because we're gonna do a total of $121 million. But we're saying we'll fund about 77 with debt.
And that first permanent, that includes the Rollins 2 powerhouse?
This includes, Ken gave me that number indicating that for the first maybe 1 to 2 years of going after that permanent license, he would need to fund about $42 million in debt.
Yes.
So
I believe
see
that's
that we
That
have,
includes it. It does include the stuff.
does include,
Rollins
the
power.
Rawls Power, yeah.
Okay. So, and again, this is preliminary in terms of what ultimately we decide, the board decides.
I see that the backbone is not funded, but the treatment plant is. That's a switch?
Yeah, the backbone we switched because Doug believes that we don't have to issue debt for it. He believes that he can kind of move stuff around
Okay.
and still get into the normal program.
Yeah, we had talked about it before, right, that the board
Right.
wanted us to try to piecemeal it within the capital budget on an annual basis versus trying to do it all in one.
Okay, so we go back to the assumptions tab. Okay, so that's capital projects. Now, interesting, the model does not assume that we will add any FTEs over the 5 years. We're going at the same level that the budget is loaded at. So those are the assumptions driving the model. And we click on the revenue requirement tab.
I have a question about the FTE.
I do too.
Sure.
Go ahead. Maybe you'll answer mine.
Yeah, so it says 210, but I thought we had 219 now.
It doesn't include recreation. So none of these figures include recreation.
Why not?
The idea is that recreation is going to break even.
It's not a cost of service
It's not
for
a
water, delivering water.
Yeah, it's not a,
It's not a, sorry, go ahead.
it's not a really financial impact to the district in terms of messing with the unrestricted reserves. Recreation's unrestricted reserves, I think like $1 million or so. So also too, but it does include that Hydro will pay the $315 throughout the 5 years.
For recreation.
For recreation.
Hydro's gonna cover recreation.
No. Hydro will only cover the $315,000. Recreation rates will still need to cover the cost other than that. And they have been.
Oh, they have them, okay.
Yeah, they have.
So my question is back.
Just recently.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I believe recreation has been in the black now for a year,
Yes.
2,
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it's been in the black.
Let's see what happens.
You're
right.
Well, yeah, 2020,
Yeah.
all bets are off, you know.
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
count, so.
Yeah.
You still have the budget. My question about the FTEs, that holding that, not including growth, has there been growth? What is the historic growth, is that in here somewhere?
No. The recreation FTEs, there has been historic growth.
No, I meant the 200.
The district.
The 210? Yeah, I mean, there's been some growth in the FTEs.
Right, but not negative, not this.
And so this assumes that every FTE we have on the books, there's a body in that place.
Yes,
Correct.
and if we don't fill it up, we save money. But this assumes that we can run at that FTE level.
Full capacity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so those are the big assumptions driving the model. You can expand this a little bit more, Chris, if they can't see it. Okay, so what this particular schedule is showing this. So if we scroll up to the top, the very top line is the total requirement, which is essentially the operating budget of the water fund. So that's the total requirement, which is essentially just the operating budget of the water fund. So we start with the total operating budget of the water fund. In fact, if you click in one of those cells, like click in D6 or something like that. Yeah, if you click in that cell, you'll see that it is running from the water tab. So this is essentially the total operating budget of your water fund. The next cells give you the other sources that are going to cover your operating budget in addition to your water rates. So right now we're going to use other operating revenue at $1.186 million to contribute. We'll use our investment income. Prior to this this particular rate model, we were using the investment income to cover capital projects. Now we're using the investment income to cover operating rates. It's fine. I'm just showing you that that's the case.
It's like, returns on the money that we just have in bonds.
Yes. The money in your portfolio, your bonds laid, things like that. So we're using all of that to assist with operating the system. We used to use that for projects, capital projects, but that's fine. Your transfer ins are big here now because now these transfer ins, the way the model was set up, and we can change it, it includes the $6 million transfer in from hydro, and it's also including a transfer in of about $4 million to $6 million of property taxes. And so we'll show you that once we get on that tab. We didn't put any money for grant, we may get some. Now, we go down to the line that says rate revenue requirement. This gives you what the rates should cover. So the rates should cover this amount. And those amounts are driven by the rate increases. The next line, the treated water sales. Yes, you can click into it, Chris. This essentially tells you, given the rate percentages that the model is applying now, we can change it. This is how much water sales will be recovered through the treated water customers, and then this is how much will be recovered through the raw water. You remember the first slide, the department slide, which showed the percentage that should be recovered through treated water? Remember that? So Chris, click back on that one department slide real quick. Yes. Just click that real quick, so I'll just refresh the memory. Just reflect their memory a little bit. Okay. This last column, based upon our guidance, the treated water customers should be accounting for about 66% of the revenue, and the raw should be accounting for about 34%. Now you can go back over to the model. Now, based upon the way we have the rate structure now, the treated water customers are recovering how much? And the raw is this much. So essentially, we would have to tweak the rates just a little bit to finish lining them up with the actual cost allocation method. Also, the way our rates are right now structured, we're recovering how much of the cost in our base rate? 47. But
So we're almost at that 50-50.
we're almost at the 50-50. We would have to tweak it. It'd be very easy to tweak it. I'm just we're just demonstrating right now what the model is doing. Okay, and that's just a chart that shows that underneath this instance, we are recovering, slightly less than our revenue requirement. The last, line, over, under, this is essentially just tells you whether or not the rates are big enough to recover the cost, or, and you will have surplus or you won't. That's all it's saying. So if we click on the water tab, and you can maybe, yeah, and you can, there we go. Now, this is where, all of the numbers come into play. So if we scroll up to the top, you can see the treated water sales. Right now, we're assuming the 5.72% as well as 1% in demand. If you click inside, you don't have to click inside, that's fine, because I don't want to. So now you can just see how the numbers are adding up. You see that one line, line 15, it says transfer in property taxes? And that's us transferring property taxes into the operating fund to offset the cost. You can see that underneath the model, Hydro is maintaining the $6 million.
So a question about the transfer of property tax, because we've talked about this in the past. What, the difference between 20 and 21, if we're using property tax to augment the budget versus what was it doing, what did we use it for? I mean, what is dropping off the radar? What projects are dropping off?
What's happening? It's just free money.
It's just free, no, it's not. Something had to give somewhere in order to do this, that's just a curiosity. I'm not opposed to it, I think it's what we have to do now, but
Yeah,
that's a question.
that's a good question.
And, which one of you guys?
There's a number of programmatic projects
Programmatic,
that
that's where.
have been, we've been looking at to delay.
Yeah, that's my
A
question.
1-year sort of stop. We could utilize $7.5 million out of $13 million budget line item and delay and utilize it for debt service. So, I don't know if you want to go into the
Well, I think it's important, it's an important factor based on our, not our theology, is not the right word. Or the direction we're going, we still have to do this, we can't just say, well, we're gonna do that without considering what priorities are there on that other side that we're now going to delay, and how serious are they, not just, we can't just wave the magic wand, we have hard work to do, I believe in that realm, and I wanna be sensitive to those, infrastructure things that are mandated and failing wired, right?
That's correct. Doug, you want to go through
That's maybe another
highlight?
question, or if you want to touch on that a little bit,
Yeah.
because that's, how many dollars is that?
On to the capital project line.
So it's, am I talking loud enough?
You can move Marvin, move your,
Can I?
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Karaoke.
There you go. So he can see the level of capital projects that we're saying we're gonna run with.
What's that?
Yeah,
Oh,
but there-
okay. So there's a couple of things, right? What you see in this coming year is the 7.5. What you see after this year, 2022 through 2025, you're showing at $4 million. So of that roughly 13 and some change capital that we come in with property taxes, the model is showing that at least $4 million will continue to go to debt service throughout this 5-year window. In this 1 year, 2021, we were looking to do some additional, bringing in some additional property taxes to help offset, to get our number to work for next year's 2021 budget. So some of the things that we're looking at in terms of impacts. If you remember in the draft CIP we did in Engineering Committee, we had roughly $2 million going into reserves in this 2021 budget. That was what was estimated that we could put into reserves for future projects. So there's roughly $2 million right there. We also have the sediment program. We talked about the sediment program and whether that's something we need to continue moving forward with. So right now, we're in a study to determine what level of effort and how we should move forward with that project. That's $1 million program, so there's another $1 million right there. So we're gonna postpone any sediment work next year, other than just working on our sediment, study. In addition to that, we think we can get Centennial down for next year, just enough to take care of the water rights requirements. So it's currently sitting at $500,000. You know, we'd recommend that would go down to like $50,000 for next year. So you'd have that money sitting there. The BEP is another one. The BEP had $3 million scheduled to be in it for next year. That's the Lake Wildwood to, correct, the backbone extension.
Because it's 8 phases or something, were those projected, or the idea was one a year, or one every 2 years?
Yes, we were breaking it up into segments, right, that we would build these out over multiple years. And the first 2 to 3 years had $2 to $3 million per year to try to cover those sections. So for next year, we would not do that $3 million, so there's another $3 million sitting there. The other things we gotta consider are the district finance water line extensions.
Right.
That's another one that has roughly $500,000 in it for next year that we would consider postponing out a year, as well as the South Yuba Canal. South Yuba Canal the CIP had $500,000 for the next 5 years sitting in it. We're not even sure when that officially becomes ours yet,
Yes.
but in this next year, we could most likely postpone any kind of real work on it. So that was another one that got pushed out. So that roughly gets us to the 7.5.
Okay, thank you, that's quite in line.
Yeah, and then, of course, just in general, right, the projects, with less money to spend every year, you have to
Right.
spread those out farther, right?
So, back to water line extensions, I always confuse between those and the district finance ones. What's an example of one that we would fund totally?
So replacement of a pipeline, a treated water pipeline that needs to be replaced.
But
Correct,
extension-
or upgraded. Extensions, no. Typically, we
Oh,
would
okay.
not extend a project,
Okay, I thought,
extend water line for services directly. The district has not historically done that.
like the work we're doing now in Lidster.
Yeah, correct,
That's a
Correct.
replacement.
right.
Okay,
Or not, right. Same with the raw water stuff.
right,
Upgrading, replacing canals and casing sections,
okay.
replacing structures, that type of thing.
But we would, the unwritten policy has been to use property taxes to promote projects where, like water line extensions or ones that don't currently have water service. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And therefore, that's why we use it on Centennial. Right? Yeah.
And was that a policy, or is that
Well, unwritten policy.
it's an unwritten policy, tribal policy?
Tribal policy.
Right. It's been practice. And
Right.
so we have, Doug can attest, Chip on his side, Jackie in the maintenance, we have more projects than we have money, that's for sure. This is pushing some programmatic and project work out a year. We have to come back and address them.
We have to come back.
But this is a Band-Aid to get us through 21, without doing the 218 process this year.
Right. This is that's why we're here today, to look at that.
Correct.
Okay, do we pull that trigger or not?
Right.
Can we do it, and what does it look like?
And what does it look like? How can we do it?
I mean, we still, there's still work to be done. Hydro has quite a bit in its capital. I think it's gonna be 5.5 in 2021. So, those are things that we'll be helping and working on as well, right? In addition to, there's 6 or 7 projects within our treated and well water replacement stuff that would be in next year's budget that we'd be working on. So, it's not like we're cutting cold
Right.
turkey.
Yeah,
We are able to do projects,
Right.
maybe they're a bit smaller and
If you notice, also directed, the level of capital project spending that we can do in this model. See where it says capital projects?
Yep.
If we would do $7 million in 2021.
Yep.
And we would run at about a $7 million level, throughout the forecast. So the projects will be divvied up. They would have about $7 million to run with. As opposed to 2019, we were running at about $12 million level. We've run at about a $7 million level.
That's, Marvin, that's assuming that the remainder of the property tax revenue isn't fully spent in capital projects, but put into reserves. Some of it's put into reserves.
That's correct, that's correct. Okay, if you scroll down a little bit, Chris, just a little bit. Okay, you can pause right there. Underneath this scenario, the capital project reserve at the end of 2025 would be $19 million.
That's assuming we do the Prop 218 and implemented these other increases going forward.
Well, that's 6%.
Assuming it was a 6% for the
Yes. Right now,
last 3 years of
we
the
do 5.7 now.
And we would increase it, we would promote at 6% starting next after.
Well,
an assumption.
That's an assumption.
It's an assumption.
It shows these numbers. Yeah.
But it does show you that even with this scenario, the capital reserve would still be at $19 million after the 5-year period, running at about $7 million a year in capital projects. We may need to run higher than that, I don't know, but, you know, that's kind of the assumption that's in there now.
I had a question, if we could scroll back to where we just came from.
Down a little bit more. Yeah, just one more. There you go, Chris, yeah.
Yes, the capital projects one for this year shows 27 million. Does that include, Kobe?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
That's why that's so big.
that's why it's so big.
And Alta Sierra tank as well.
Oh, Sierra tank. Okay.
And we haven't spent on Alta Sierra tank yet, have we? We've just
We've
committed.
issued the contract and we're in design currently. Construction is to start in October. But we're reduced from the original 5 million gallons, we reduced to a smaller tank size than what the board had approved, which saved about $1 million.
But this 27 million assumes the full,
It had $7 million in capital, I think, for 2 from rolled over from last year and 5 in this year's budget for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's included in that $7 million.
It's rolling, it's always mysterious.
and I know that half of Combi was done in 2019.
Right.
And so that amount is part of that 11.89 million.
It would be, if we did some combi spending in 2019, it will be in that number.
It's in that number.
Thank you.
Because it was all encumbered in 2019.
Yeah, yeah, and when it's encumbered, the way our forecasting works is that for this purpose, once it's encumbered, we have to assume that we're going to spend it that year so that we won't forecast off of cash that we've already committed for.
Well, that's my question, because if we encumbered Combi in 2019, wouldn't that, you could say Combi was in the 2020
Well, I'm assuming
estimate?
Was
split,
What
because from the rollover.
for 2019, so scroll down just a little bit.
Spent in the year it was encumbered.
So, I'll explain it. Fiscal year 2018, right? Clicking at 5.72. That's the audited cash balance for fiscal year 2018. So we know we're starting at a good balance, the audited cash balance. For fiscal year 2018, we assume that we're going to spend all of our encumbrances in 2018. So that 11.7, that's taking out all of the encumbrances at the end of 19. That number of 11.8 at the top, that's what we've spent. That's actually spent. So the 2019, you see that 11.8 million? That's cash we spent. Now you see that 11.7 million, right? That's encumbrances. So what it is that we got everything we spent and we got everything we encumbered. So that when we go into 2020, you're not forecasting based upon things you have encumbered. So you got to take out that. And when you scroll down a little bit, at the end of 19, we were saying we were only going to have about 1.5 million in reserves left in capital. That was that, I think that was that DFWE that we had already accounted for. So at the end of 2020, we really we won't have no capital reserves according to this model because we got to account for all of those encumbrances of 2020, whether we spend them or not. We got to account for them now. So when we forecast out, we can't forecast off of money we committed for. Good to me?
So the model assumes you spend it all down. In reality,
Yeah.
it's not.
Value you may not spend down.
Yeah.
You see the report, you might see some capital reserves. However, for forecasting purposes, you got to clear that out because you're forecasting based upon reserves you've already accounted for. in encumbrances. So you have to take it out for forecasting. Otherwise, you would be saying, well, okay, I've encumbered $12 million. Well, here's my reserve. Then you forecasting based upon that big number. No, you got to assume that those encumbrances are going to get wiped out, and then you forecast out.
And this is college accounting.
This is how you forecast. Because if you don't forecast based upon you having already taken care of all your commitments, you're forecasting with a number that you can use for operating, but you can't because you've already committed to it in encumbrance.
Marvin, historically, do we spend all of our encumbrances year over year?
We never do. But for forecasting purposes, you got to pick out, here's the thing. It could be that one year where operations or capital consulting and everything is fired up, right?
It fires
You
up.
wipe it all out. And then you're believing that you're gonna have some cash to go forward, you don't. So you gotta forecast it like that. And I've seen some operations where they were anticipating that they were gonna have some rollover cash, cleared it all out. Then you have to try to get a short-term bridge loan to take our operation. So that's the way the model is set up. At the end of 2025, at these levels, we still would have about $19 million in capital reserves. So the model does not assume that we're going to just wipe out all capital reserves.
Right.
It does build it some.
Because that would not be a good thing to do anyway.
I wouldn't recommend it. Because something always happens when you wipe it out.
Right. You don't want to do that.
Okay, so those are the unrestricted reserves. These are the restricted reserves here. These here you can't really mess with. So in other words, for 2018, hold on for a second. For 2018, see that 18.4 million? That's the restricted reserves you had, and bond money and capacity fees. That's on your CAFR, that's what you got. The model assumes in 2018 that we had to clear out, for 2018, we will have certain cash flows. Now, the model assumes at the end of 2020, our restricted reserves will go down to 5.6 because we will have cleared out all of our bond proceeds by the end of this year. They're all on POs now. Even if we don't clear them out, I still got to assume we're going to clear them out, so that we can forecast right. Okay.
That $2 million in 2019 estimated cash flow, that was for the debt service of the 20.
Portions of that is debt service for the capacity fees. You know, this portion of that is you using a portion of your capacity fees to service the debt. Portion of that is us looking at the project saying this can qualify for capacity fee use. You know, portions of us is just us saying that. So, under this scenario, the unrestricted total, and we'll look at Hydro's model real quick, and then we'll come back to the unrestricted total. So we click at Hydro's model real quick, Hydro's tab. So if we click on Hydro's tab real quick, so go down.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah. Click it, and then we go open it up a little bit. This is Hydro's tab. We see Hydro's fees. For 2019, we got about $24.3 million. For 2020, we should get about the same thing. Notice how we said in 2024, if you click on 2024, we had to reduce that by 20% for the Chicago Park Rewind. That essentially means that we will lose $5 million in Hydro revenue doing that rewind. So obviously that's money that we won't get back. 2025 assumes we'll lose another $2 million until the rewind is done. Expenses won't go down. They will keep going up while we're losing revenue. Hydro uses the same assumptions as water in terms of the salaries, in terms of everything else. Notice on line 16, debt service. So we click 2023. This is saying that we will issue those $77 million in bonds around 2024, and Hydro will service how much? $4.1 million. So what they're saying is that essentially we issue the bonds, hopefully we can issue them for 30, 35 years, and then Hydro's debt service will go up. Hydro will service the bonds.
Is that in response to, FERC licensing, the things that are FERC licensing?
There's a lot of things. Click on the new debt, the little new debt tab.
It also includes Scott's Flat.
There you go. School Scotts Flat, relicensing.
Oh, yeah, we're-
42 million.
The number could perhaps be bigger, but we just went with 77 now.
Oh, I see, okay.
The model is showing how much leverage the district can take. So click on where it says debt service coverage. Click on that tab. Yes, and go down. Okay, right there. This is the model is showing you essentially how much leverage, scroll down a little bit, how much leverage the district can take and still be at a good debt service coverage ratio.
Okay.
If the district issued 77 million in debt in 2024 with all the assumptions, rate increases, labor, all of that, our debt service coverage would be how much in 2024? Our bond will cover this, require only 1.25. Never really want to go too low than 2, so it's still at a leverage, it's still at a coverage where I believe it will hold AA+. You know, still at that level.
Well, we're AA minus right now.
Well, we're only AA- on the 2011. On the 2016, we're AA+.
Oh.
Remember?
Oh, I never knew that.
Yes.
That's new.
Yeah, yeah.
It's new today.
Yeah, and Fitch is going to release our new bond rating on the 2011 shortly. For our new debt, for our new refunding debt, we're going with S&P, we're not going with Fitch. I'm not sure if Fitch is more sensitive, but we're going to go with S&P as the rating agency.
Oh, we have an option, we get to pick who.
Yeah, the S&P costs a bit more money, but I think it's worth it because some of them are kind of skittish and you give you a bad bond rating when the other agency says, wait a minute, what are you doing? This guy's been around 100 years, you know, it's got good cash flow. So,
How much more?
it's a little bit more. I don't think it's that much more. So, now we go back over to the hydro model. And that's the debt service that we would begin servicing. And you notice the transfer in, these are the proceeds that we would transfer in, and hydro would do the projects. I just put it all in 1 year. Most of the projects may occur over a few years, but in terms of just presenting the cash flows, you know, you show in and out. So that being the case, if we scroll down just a little bit, hydro's reserves are good if only they use 6 million. Notice how that transfer out to water is 6 million?
Yeah.
Hydro's reserves are good, running at 54, 55 million throughout the forecast. So their reserves are good, even servicing 77 million in debt. So it's a good scenario. Okay, so we can go back over to water now. Now this is the unrestricted reserve totals under this scenario. Water would increase its reserve totals up to about $24 million throughout the forecast. Water would do it, given obviously those rate increases, and then hydro would go strong. So this scenario would put the district into a better financial position than we're in now. But again, there's assumptions in it.
And this is only with 6%.
This is only with 6%. It's good. It's a good assumption.
And that's 6% across the
Can we
board.
make it work?
Yeah, but remember, that's 6% across the board.
Gotta go 218 process first.
Well, we have to do this.
But what we would still do is that we will still tweak the rates a little if we want to get to the 69% treated and the 34% raw. It's almost there. I mean, you saw it's almost there. It was like a little tweaking, but it's almost there.
This doesn't account for any structural changes within the district.
And that's the thing, it's locked in. It doesn't account for big
It's
stuff.
all on the ratepayers instead of any internal.
Well,
No.
go back to
Yeah.
water.
Not quite there yet.
Go back to water. Yeah, scroll up for water.
No,
Okay, scroll up a little bit more. Scroll up a little bit more.
it's not.
Okay, stop right there. Now, the materials, chemicals, consultants line item. Click right there. Where you see that 2020 forecast at $10 million?
Yeah.
The actual budget now is $13 million. The 2021 budget for that category is $13 million. What we're saying is that the staff is going to come in at 10. obviously, if we come in at 13, this blows out, because we're trending at 10. We're trending, what we're saying is essentially that we're gonna hold that line item for the next 5 years at the forecast level.
The budget for 21 is 13?
13 million, right now, in water, for 2020, the budget is 13
For
million.
2020 or for 2021?
No, we have done
We haven't
2021.
done 2020.
2020. So what we're saying is that we're gonna come in about 3 million less, and it's gonna hold that all the way for 5 years.
But we need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
We need to be very careful with that assumption on this offset. Yeah. Why? Because what we're doing right now, 13 million is the 2020 budget number. We believe that at the end of, right now, after last month's budget adjustments and looking at mid-year, we feel like we'll come in roughly $3 million short of the budgeted 13 million. COVID set certain, we're realizing certain staffing positions that aren't filled. So we're realizing some gains on project work and staffing that we were unable to do this first 6 months of the year due to COVID, and we're projecting it out through the end of the year at 10 versus the 13.
Okay.
We are looking at 2021's budget, and staff currently is looking at how we can bring 2021's number of that particular line item, materials, chemicals, and consultants, to a level of around a $10 million, holding steady with the 2020 year. But we need to be careful on.
Greg makes a good point. I want to show the committee the impact that if we can't hold that line. So, that line was forecasted at 10, so we were trending off of a 10 million number. So what if we come in at closer to the budget, where we have to come in, which is 13 million? And what if we say, well, we just can't go that low? Now go down to reserves, and you're gonna see. Keep going down.
You plugged in
I plugged in the real budget number.
You plugged in the real budget.
Stop. So if we actually can't do it, you can see how close we are to that $50 million unrestricted throughout the forecast.
Where's that at?
Right above there.
See right there?
Go up a little bit, Chris.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, right
54
there.
million.
Above the yellow line.
Yeah, and you look at the water fund would actually need more transfer in, because no way we could get this close and me feel comfortable.
And that's just that one line.
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 The other lines are there.
So you gotta be careful that,
So let me see if I'm understanding right. So what were these two numbers when it was?
so the the actual budget is about $13 million. And we're saying that we're gonna come in at about 10 for that category of expenses. If we can't come in at 10, and we actually have to run with the budget number 13 million, this is the reserve impact of that, which is, you can see the water fund underneath this instance will be too close. You couldn't operate the fund on 700,000. You would have to have bigger transfer ins from this guy.
Where's your 700,000?
See 2022?
Oh, I see.
And Marvin, I think the question was, what happens if we put that back to 10? How do those numbers change? Can we do that real quick?
Yeah, just hit undo. If you just hit undo. There you go. Now you scroll down. A little bit more. There you go.
So we're back.
So you're back. See, what it is essentially is what it's showing you is that if you can save that $3 million and then run with a lower level, you're going to have much more reserves. But what Greg pointed out is that you got to be careful, because you might not be able to run with that 10 million level throughout the model. The budget right now is at 13 million, but due to COVID and slow ups, people can't even work. People are slowing up, so you ain't gonna spend that money.
Well,
You might pay some of it.
if I may, that in the future, as we look towards 2021, as we're building budgets right now, so all departments are bringing departmental budgets starting next week to the committees. We're looking currently to see how much of that delta we can shave off in a 2021 one-year episode, right? There are certainly, we're giving up something by doing that. We're lowering services, we're lowering, right? And so we do need to
You think we're
look
lowering
into,
services?
we are,
How so?
well, yeah.
So for example, I'm currently working on my budget and trying to hit the lower targets here. So the things that we are purposely putting off, and hopefully just for a year, are just the normal operating expenses that you can't just put off forever. For instance, we all have vehicles that we drive to the jobs and get to the sites, and we put off those truck purchases. It's a pretty substantial amount of money, but you can't continue to do that for 5 years, obviously.
You can do it one time for 1 year.
You can do it for 1 year, and then unfortunately, you gotta catch back up at some point in time. That's one example, and there's a lot of other ongoing, costs for running the facilities. Many of the preventative maintenance programs that we have in place can be paused for a very short period of time, but if you ignore them for too long, you now become reactionary instead of proactive. And that's when you start running into scenarios where things at the treatment plant fail unexpectedly, and now you're scrambling to find out how to fix it. Whereas the proactive approach that we're trying to get towards, involves, that's where we're cutting a little bit of this, and it will hurt us in the long run if we don't return back to that proactive nature.
There are a number of different, and we're building those, and so the idea is, as we go into the different committees and discuss the 2021 budget, is to highlight some of those areas where we've decided, hey, this is truck purchases. Because you'll see when you look at the 2021 budget, you'll see 2020's budget, and then you'll see what happens in 21. So you'll be able to see that reduction in expense or that removal of certain things. And it could be from, consultant line items. Maybe there's less specific studies we're doing, or less project-related activities that we might have wanted to move forward with, but we're putting on hold. In my instance, and as an example, we budget roughly $100,000 a year or 80 in annexations. I don't anticipate in 21 we'll do any annexations. So that's a level that is a service to the community that we actively seek out, and the community comes to us. And if it's not budgeted, we won't be doing it next year. But can we put it off forever? The answer is no. We put truck purchases off forever? No. So those are some of the things, and we don't have those exact numbers at the moment, where staff is looking at all of this, that what we can eke out next year. And it's a Band-Aid. But look for those when we come to the next committee meetings over August, that we will discuss those activities that we feel that we can reduce for next year alone.
So, Chip, back to are the equipment purchases of trucks, is that the bulk of the $3 million that we're talking about?
So it's
Materials.
materials too.
Yeah, materials, and we live with that.
Well, that's the problem, right?
Fixed and variable.
What's that?
$3 million is not an easy chunk of change to come up with in an operating budget. And it is spread district-wide. It's not just water operations, it's engineering, it's admin, it's maintenance. It's all of us combined, putting together. But really what it's about, and I'm still in the preliminary stages of developing my budget. Trucks was the first one that came to mind. But there's other things like chemical storage tanks. They have a 15-year life expectancy. We have like 30 of them. So we are proactively going in and replacing them, knowing they're at their life expectancy. That's another example of, okay, let's hold off a year on those and buy some time, save some money for 1 year, get us through this little hump, and then we get back to purchasing those in a proactive nature. Pumps, motors, controls, those kinds of things, that's really what we're talking about, right? Okay. We did leave some money for emergency purposes, because I don't want to be left empty-handed, but we're cutting back as much as we can, hoping that this is a one-time deal.
Just so you know, this concept of dropping it from a 13 to a 10 and to 20 3%.
Yeah. That's what
Todd?
Jacqueline and I looked at her budget. Jacqueline, for that category, Jacqueline had about 3 million materials, vegetables, all that kind of stuff in there. And I looked at her spending rate through now. The spending rate indicates that she's not gonna spend roughly about 600,000, I don't know, COVID or whatever. But you're not gonna be able to cram that much work in the next 6 months. So you're not gonna spend it, but like Greg said, over the 5-year model, it may not be sustainable to say you're only gonna work at that pace. They get a cure to COVID, everything gets fired up, so.
So if we remember this year's, the rate package for this year, as we come back to this rates conversation, we said that the hydroelectric reserves and pulling, in addition to the 6 million, we brought in 13.5. We said that's not sustainable. So we're making up that balance of what we brought in this year to cover the additional costs. We're looking for next year to make up that balance through operations and through not doing capital projects.
It's my understanding that we never got a single transfer in from hydro until 2013 or 2014, that hydro, all of the money went to PG&E, that we did not get any money from hydro that was available to augment water.
No, we had used about 15 million in hydro money, water was using it, until hydro was able to pay back that loan. So when water was doing the FERC expenses, the board had used about $15 million in hydro money. When I got here, we put in an interfund loan. That interfund loan allowed hydro to pay that back.
Marvin, I think she's referring to the time before hydro became an NID asset.
Right.
And she's correct. It was.
Oh, yeah.
It was PG&E, funded,
Yeah.
and basically the funds didn't come back to NID till after 2013 when the asset.
There you
But
go. All they did was,
that's why they were also doing the operation maintenance of the upper division.
They were paying for all the folks to be working up there, right? So
Yeah.
they paid for the labor component of it. We just didn't see it in the generation revenue.
so this was probably, because I know that 15 million loan that we put in place, that was water paying. And so this was before hydro became our asset, or after, or was doing it kind of
It
like
was
process.
to help, pay for the FERC negotiation and development process.
And then once they got online, they paid that back.
And so we probably, in hindsight's always 20/20, but we should have not ever gotten to the practice of subsidizing water so much at the expense of hydro.
I think that's always been the creation of hydro was always to subsidize water.
Correct.
That's why
It's just that the regulation and the cost to run the hydro division now are substantial.
Exponentially
And so there's not as much subsidy available to water anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the water originally was proposed to be free.
Now, that's what I hear all the time.
Free is the word, and some people are still using that word, yeah.
But we do know, and we mentioned this one of our first rates committee meetings, that the hydro money, apart from the transfer in, whether it's 13.5 million this year or 6 million at some other point, is that all of that water to get from where it is at the top of the mountain all the way to Scotts Flat and Rollins and that elevation, it is free to
It is free
the ratepayers to get there.
To get to the Rollins and Scotts Flat.
So there is an element there,
And I've been using that argument.
on top of the transfer in.
Which was, yeah, right.
Okay, so this is the model, and the model uses all of the direction that the board gave. It uses direction, regarding the treated and raw customer cost recovery. It uses direction regarding the allocation base to use. This provides a sustainable transfer in level for hydro, and it also assumes that we can use a portion to cover the debt service. So this model does all of that. This is what the board had wanted us to develop, and it does all of it.
Oh, very good. I'm impressed. I'm encouraged.
Now, if you click on the rates tab, what this does is this.
Treated
Treat
and raw?
it. Go treat it. and you can expand it a little bit. This kind of gives you an indication of what the rates would be like underneath the model assumptions. The base rate for 2021 for the treated customer would go to $31.35. And if you go down to the commodity, so we scroll down a little bit to the commodity. The commodity rate right now for Tier 1 would go to $2.42. And then the Tier 2 would go to $3. And, but again, this is, it may be slightly different than that once we allocate, once we develop the rate schedule. It won't be vastly different, it'll just be, it could be a little different. Now, if we look at the raw water rates, this customer here, we can open up a little bit. The raw water rates now, for the base rate, it's about, it's $540, that will go to $570. That might go a little bit bigger because remember, the raw guy has to get to 34%, and this model has him at 32%. Wouldn't be significantly bigger, just be a little bit bigger. And then if you go down to the per miner's inch, I haven't had Chip look at this. He hasn't tested this out. I'll have Chip test this real good. The miners, you scroll up just a little bit. The miner's inch for the summer rates, I think it's about 318, and it would go to about 336. But again, it wouldn't be significantly different than this. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be significantly different. And based on the rates, essentially, that determine the revenue. You know, in the beginning of the model, you had the percentage increases. And these are the rates resulting from that. And so that's kind of how the model fleshes everything out. And so this, I didn't have a whole lot more than that regarding the model.
Okay.
Any thoughts on it? Seems the right direction to go, or remember, we'll give direction, we'll bring back direction to the board.
Yes, right, I think our goal here is to say, to either recommend that we go with this for this year, or say we don't see that it works, we've got to jump into the rate increase now. I'm comfortable with where it is, based on the hard work you've done, Marvin. I'm impressed with, I don't know how long this takes, we've got to take a long time to do this, and I'm encouraged by the numbers, even though we're talking cuts for 1 year. And even looking forward, if we plugged in, and then the other part is that the raw water, at some point, we have to increase the raw water rates and not the treated water
A little
rates.
bit.
Just bring them up, right?
So if you go in there, revenue requirement tab,
Well, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
click on that tab.
So we're saying that raw water, we have to bring the raw water up to meet what? What's the goal of?
The raw water should have been paying roughly 34% of the cost, the recovery cost.
Yeah.
Underneath this model,
Based on the postage stamp?
no, there's both. Remember, the allocation basis we would use would be the delivery department's percentage and the number of accounts. The number of accounts, we're only using that allocate basis for overhead, because Greg and I can't associate our time with raw and treated. It doesn't make sense. So it's the number of accounts for us. But Trip and Jacqueline and those people, they can use the actual cost, which we determine through the rate study.
And that's where the difference is that we need to make up. Can we go back to that slide, Cribbage, please? The assumptions slide, I believe, the tab.
It was, I think, the one that we started the meeting with.
Oh, yes, go to this department. Yes, there you go. Okay, so
Yeah, this one.
So this one here, what this is saying, directives, is that for our current budget, the way our budget is structured, this is the way our cost is. for our budget, 46% of our budgeted cost is in support departments. And that means 6% of the forecast is in support departments, because the forecast is just an extension of your budget. So 46% is within that. 54% of your cost, you can track to delivery departments. Okay? So 54% you can track to delivery departments. Now, what we're saying is that 54%, of that 54%, Treated needs to recover 54%, and Raw needs to recover 46% of that dollar amount. Okay, so, see that dollar amount, that $24.3 million? 24.3 million. That represents 54% of your total budget. Of that 24.3 million, Treated needs to recover 54%, and Raw needs to recover 46%, based upon the cost of service historicals. The cost of service historicals told us that Treated is accounting for 54%, and Raw is accounting for 46% of those specific departments. Okay? So, the support departments, the total support department is 46%. That's $21 million of the budget. That's almost half the budget. We can't simply say we can use these same allocations to recover that amount. There's no relationship there. We can't say that. So what we're saying is that of the $21 million, we're going to recover that based upon the number of accounts. In the number of accounts treated, it's a bigger pot.
54%.
It's 79% of the number of accounts. It's a bigger guy. So, and when you blend the two together, the two costs together, Treated has to recover $29 million of the budget. Raw has to recover $15 million of the budget. Those percentages work out to be 65 and 34. This 65 and 34 target is what you're trying to meet in your cost of service. Because your cost of service, remember, it's a forecast. So it's a forecast. Essentially, you just forecast the budget, right? All you do is forecast your budget. So once you forecast your budget out 5 years, Treated has to recover 65%, and Raw has to recover 34%. Now, given the way we've set the rates, go back over to the model. You know what you do, Chris? Just copy those percentages real quick. Just select those, and then just right-click on it and just go copy, and go back over to the little model. And it's fine. Yeah, it will let you. You should be able to do it, because you should go view. You should be able to go view and switch over. There you go.
It's the copy thing. Don't worry about the copy thing.
Okay, what was it? What was it? 60?
That's shared.
Let me write it down. So it was
Old-fashioned.
64.4 and 34.6.
Yeah.
okay. Now go back over to your model.
36.6.
64.4 and
And then go back over to the
34.6.
revenue requirement.
Be 35.
Scroll up a little bit. Scroll up a little bit.
34.6.
Okay, right where it says treated water, go to cell I-20. And then just type in 64.4%.
Oh, no, I don't know if that's, 64.4 and 34 doesn't add up to 100.
Okay,
36.4.
and 36.4 for Raw.
Oh, right. More than.
All right, go.
You might want,
I think the.
okay, so maybe go back, we'll write it down, go back, Christian, then we'll write it down. There we go. That's it.
Memory's good, it's just incredibly short.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of numbers. 5.2.
Oh, my gosh.
And 34.4.
65.6.
Corrected. Peter was right. It didn't add up to be 100. It needs to, or something's wrong.
All right, 65.
What are we doing?
65.6
6, yeah.
and 34.4.
Close there.
Okay.
34.4.
Yeah. Now, even with the way that we have the rate structured, you can see we're very close to our allocation basis. All that would mean is that the treated raw rates would go down a little bit, and raw rates would go up a little bit. That's all that means.
Can I ask a question on that, Marvin? So, I'm assuming that is a discussion that we'll be tackling on the next rate survey. Now, what we're talking about for next year roll, the 5.72, we're not going to address the split. We're going to do that in the next cost of service and rate study, correct?
I would think so.
Yeah.
Because,
Very good. I just wanted to confirm.
yeah, because we're
That
basing
was my question as well.
the 2020 rates upon the new rate study. We're basing the 2021 rates are based upon the current rate study.
Current rate
Correct.
study.
The new rate study will be based upon this.
That's correct.
So do we need to do a rate study every year?
No,
No.
no, you only want to do the rate study when you want to raise rates
Raise rates.
beyond the current rate report.
Okay.
Remember, the current rate report allows us to go up high.
So there's,
Only with a 5.72.
in jumping off Chip's comment, there's two things here. One is the rate study, the rate committee, as it is looking to either go forth with the existing rate package that we have, which is the 5.72, and nothing's changed. None of these percentages change at all. And then we work for the next 8 to 12 months
Yes.
to design the rate package for '22 and beyond. And hopefully we get to a package that's greater than 3 years, up to 5 years, so we can avoid some of those costs of 218 process, and then it's next year is the 218 process.
That confusion was, I heard, next cost of service study. That was what I thought I
Yeah.
heard, yeah.
Yeah,
It's already done,
The
right?
next rate, the next rate.
the rates, the rate
The
study,
Not the cost of service.
the cost of service is done.
I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, cost of service is done. It's not gonna change. Development of the rates,
Is
as Rick pointed out,
next year.
218 legal.
Starting
That's
now.
what
It's actually starting now. We're looking at it
We're
now,
doing it.
doing assumptions now
Okay.
And
for
we
it.
look at the whole, everything holistically. I'd like to, reiterate this, we want to first figure out what the lay of land is, what organizational efficiencies we have, what's going on internally, where, how are things right now internally, and look at every aspect of our rate schedule, see our MOUs current, our, capacity fees current, our inflation costs current. And just take this time and not take off the gas pedal at all, but really double down and really see the impacts before we start divvying up 35, 50, whatever, to get that revenue needed, to ground truth that revenue needed column, figure. And that's my hope and desire. I'm hoping that I have agreement. Yeah, do you concur with that?
concur. So to capsulize what we've just been talking about, the cost of service study showed that we would have to raise rates 100% on raw water. This exercise shows me that we don't, correct?
You're correct. The cost of service study,
That's been confusing to me. This satisfies the requirements of 218,
For 1 year.
dividing them proportionally to make it work for 218.
yeah, the cost of service study,
So that's the good news.
Not for 218.
What's that?
Not for 218.
No, well, you can't charge more than the cost of service. Right?
that's correct. But Director Whitberg, the cost of service study on a summary level is doing the same thing. What the cost of service study went beyond is to try and give you cost by zone, and it would have caused some zones rates to go up 100%, while other zones get discounted. But as a whole, the 5446 it's still in the month. As a whole, the 54 treated, 46 raw is still there. It's just that some of the zones within there, the study would not have been the right way to go.
Marvin, is it safe to say that, all of the rates are, I don't know if subsidized is the right word, but essentially, due to hydroelectric's, transfer ins and the property tax revenues and all of that, if you took all those away and then did a true cost of service, is that where they came up with 100% for the raw water? If they were trying to cover it, all of those costs?
No, they were regarding, what they come up with 100% of the raw is that, assuming the allocation basis we were using, then the raw would have obviously had to go up almost 100% for some counties. But the allocation base we were using was taking about half of the budget and applying it to the known allocations we had. And that's not the right approach, because we couldn't, it wasn't really a good relationship.
That was the 21 million.
There you go.
And that's where the
Yeah.
hybrid version came.
And that's where the hybrid version is a better version.
Okay, okay, this
They're
is,
more
this is
evenly
all, this is
spread.
all good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
related,
Right.
Yeah.
to our true
It really is.
Because it was 19,000 treated customers, only 6,000.
There you go.
They have a greater burden on the customer service.
They have a greater burden, IT, HR, everything. Yeah.
And that's why using the account of the Nexus seems to make sense.
It makes sense then, yeah.
That's right.
So in the model, we will leave the, yeah, you go back to the model. We will leave those percentage goals, in the model like that to the right. And you can see we're very close to the allocation basis that we would have to get to, as well as the base rate recovery portion too.
Good job.
Very good job.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good model. Bartel and I, we kind of put together. We worked on it.
But the model is good because it's solid.
It starts you at the right reserve level. 2018 audited cash is not playing games with the beginning cash. It's where we are.
So there needs to be, at some point here, a recommendation from the committee back to the board as to what the plan is for 21 and then beyond, right? I think at this point, we're still developing budgets for 21 to see where we can get to out of that 3 million. Because that's kind of the number. We've identified some capital projects that we can delay, and we're pretty confident that we could do that for a year. We're all looking at departmental budgets to see where we can have those efficiencies in a year. And I think before this committee makes a 100% recommendation to the board, I think we would feel comfortable to spend a little more time developing our individual departmental budgets, come back to this committee in 2 weeks' time, which is the next scheduled time anyway, right? We are meeting every 2 weeks, to perhaps discuss that. By then, we'll be mid-August. We'll have gone through the APC budget for admin, finance, HR, et cetera. We'll have gone through the engineering budget. By then, ops and maintenance will be pretty close to finishing their preliminary 2021 budget. And then we can come back, I think, to this committee in 2 weeks' time with some more understanding from an operational perspective, what that means, what that $3 million means. And if we can get there and we can talk about those services that we're going to forego for a year, that's something I think you need to understand to make that determination. If we can't, we'll look for perhaps other opportunities to build that and make that happen.
So what if, just for instance, we said, okay, let's say we thought we needed to pull the 218 trigger. Timing, time-wise, to have those go into the April 1st bills, backing up how, I'm stuttering around right there. We're a drop dead date to say, we need to pull the trigger today on 218 in order to boost 2021's budget.
We're still in good shape.
We are in good shape, yeah.
we're close.
I feel like we haven't.
We're marginally. We had scheduled in the original timeline, we had scheduled, I think, 5 of these committee meetings.
Yeah.
We're at the 3rd. So I believe we were talking about early September, I think it was, to start the 218 process, right?
Yeah, it's,
And so that would have been the 45-day window of 218 process, so that's early September. So if it turns out that we come back to this in a couple weeks from now and say, there's absolutely no way that this is gonna work from an operational perspective, then I think we do, and it would be tight, but we do have, I think, a narrow window of time to re-engage on a 218 process where we're identifying that rate structure, we're engaging with Bartle Wells, in a more intense process. But right now, I think we're relatively close, but we do have time
Okay.
to finalize that. It would be tight, for sure.
The other thing we're sort of out there is the hydro budget, looking at the FERC, funding the FERC, that's gonna.
Well, yeah, I know, we've put in $42 million, I think, in 3 years from now,
Right.
right? And we know we have, what was the hydro reserves at the moment? 50?
I just, about 55 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're never gonna dump out reserves for the FERC license, you're gonna buy. You're never gonna dump out.
The first couple of years of the FERC licensing is about $2 to $3 million a year.
Well,
Yeah.
the beauty about the proposal is that it leaves the transfer in at 6 million as opposed to 13 like we did last
Well,
year.
that's the number that's in my head that I'm running around with, and I guess my point is, is FERC gonna be that big a burden that number would have to go down?
$6 million?
Yeah.
That's a, you need to.
Right.
After that.
Yeah.
Right, that's
With the future holds.
He said he was gonna do it, he's
Well.
working on a business plan.
Yeah.
That's correct.
That will show that number. 'Cause
The study that we recently presented to the board showed it's essentially within that first 5 to 7 years, I think it's $70 million.
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah.
That's if we do everything exactly.
That's if we do everything exactly as it states, and that doesn't, the first year or two, I want to say that bar graph wasn't, maybe, I think didn't go over 3 million, maybe 4, but
Well, I'm
that would have to be.
comfortable with the track we're on, saying, for that timeframe scenario.
Yeah.
Come back in 2 weeks and say, what's changed with some departments or what hasn't?
And I think your question's right, is how much time do we have to do the 218 process? Should we have to go back into it? Right now, we're sort of on this track where we've got another year of the already predetermined process. We don't have to mess with it. It's known revenue that we build into this year's budget, and it's a known commodity. So we're working towards that end. But I think from an operational perspective, the departments need to have just a little bit more time to determine what that reduction from a $13 million O&M budget to a 10 means, particularly to each department.
Do you remember how much we saved from last year's mid-year budget cut? Well, we ended up making turn right around and spent it, but the amount that we had saved.
Yeah, we saved almost $3.5 million.
So it's on par with
Did it?
last year's cut.
Yeah.
And we're able to do it.
Well, and let's add to that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Marvin, we started the next budgeting cycle using the cut budget.
No.
So that carries on.
No.
I'm sorry, for 2021.
No.
So just for clarification, we're using last year's cut budget to develop the 2021 budget.
Yes.
Starting with the lower number.
But this year, we're using the cut budget.
Right.
Oh, good.
We're using it. But last year, we didn't.
Well, the cut budget was the 2019 budget, not
Yeah.
the 2020 budget.
We didn't use the 2019 cut budget for 2020.
Right.
But for this year, we are using the 2020 amended budget. We're using the 2020 amended budget.
You mean with the adjustments? You mean maybe?
Well, remember though, the amended budget does not impact reserves. The amended budget just moves things around. However, we are still looking at the forecast beside the budget. So when we look at our schedule, we're complete our schedule, right? We have our 2021 schedule. We look at the 2020 amended budget.
With the 2020 amended budget was the way you amended just last meeting?
Yes, yes,
To the budget move?
Yes, but we're also looking at the 2019 actual spend.
The 2020 budget last time, there was a zero-sum game.
Exactly,
was
it
just from out,
did
but
impact
it
reserve,
changed.
it just moved stuff around. That's why we were also looking at the 2019 actual spend. So the department managers, they got 3 columns. Think about it in your mind, they got 3 columns. For their accounts, they got the actual spend for 2019, the actual amount of money they spent. For 2020, they have the budget, the amended budget, which shows them how much they believe they're going to spend on a particular account in 2020, yes. And then they got the 2021 column, so they can do their forecast. So they got 3 annual numbers. Essentially, they got 2018 they spent, and they got 2020 looking at approximately what they think they're going to spend.
You mean 2019 actual or 2019?
Actual, Bear.
Actual.
Yeah, actual. So you got to know what you spent in 2018 actually. And then in 2020, you got a good estimate of what you think you're going to spend. It's essentially your forecast, what you think you're going to spend. And then 2021, you got to make an assumption based upon the level for that account. The level for that account of materials, chemicals, what have you. And then you do it.
So those are coming to committees starting next week. And we'll be able to dive into those.
So, yeah, so we haven't checked the 20, well, we don't get the 20, when do we get the 2019 audited?
That's not.
The 2018 audit you're going to get in August, around August 26th, is when we're projecting to bring that to the board.
So we can actually true up what was budgeted for the amended 2019 to what was actually spent.
But what you'll
2019.
see is pretty darn
It's
close.
going to be very close.
Yeah.
There's not going to be much between the audited and what
It's gonna be very
department's got, on what we're planning on from the budget
It'll be
process.
very close. Remember when we did that training before the board, and I demonstrated that the actual audited 2018 was only 1.4% of the cash level of what you were looking at when you approved the budget. So it's going to be very close.
So kind of getting into budget talk and kind of a little off of rates. So I think at this point, if the committee's okay with the direction at the moment, we will come back in 2 weeks' time to talk about this, the comfort level of the model as we looked at it for 2021. Remember, this model, we have to do a whole new rate study or a rates package to really go out to that 2025 year. We're not there.
Right, we have to have.
Yeah, no,
We're not there.
So you could do the model.
Just so we can do the model.
We're only looking at year 1,
That's right.
next year.
And so, if we're okay with that from the committee level at the moment, we'll come back in a couple months with a little more detail on what that model means to operations, and hopefully we can have enough information to make the recommendation to go back to the board the very next week with this process.
And Greg, if I could make a suggestion, when we bring the model back, if we bring it back perhaps around the end of August or around that time, we will have the 2021 budget figures loaded in the model. So right now, the model, the 2021 model, is not running from the actual budget figures. But if we wait until we have predominantly the budget figures developed, I'll load that into the model. And then you will be forecasting from a budget number where you've seen the detail.
So that wouldn't be in 2 weeks' time, though.
It would be, that's why I say if you could perhaps bring it back once we,
Well, the timing on that is tough, is problematic, because the timing
but the
is that the 218 needs to hit by early
This is
September.
true. But I feel confident, though, that if our forecast for 2021 and that 10 million line, if we hit that right, I feel confident that the budget number is not going to be drastically different from that.
Okay.
You know, I don't think it's going to be drastically different.
Yeah. Okay, so can we maybe open it up to?
Thank you very much. It's a lot of work you put together there, Marvin. It's, I think you're on a very good path. I just have a question and a comment. The question is, I was trying to understand what is happening to the Backbone project. Is that a one-year delay, or I notice it's not on the capital project list. So what's the interpretation on the Backbone project?
Yeah, so we would be, not building any phases next year, is what we're looking at this time. We're working on some internal pieces that need to be done within our existing system for this year, but next year we would not expend monies for that program. And then it would start up again the following year as we start to develop the CIP out for those future years.
Okay, and the comment is, there was a proposal that you pause preventative maintenance. That sounds highly dangerous to me. I think you should really think about that because there's a big downside to that.
I concur, John, and I think a lot of the preventive maintenance is labor costs, to maintain facilities. Is that correct? Or what is involved in?
No, it's really just materials and supplies that we're talking about. The labor is not in that calculation. And John, I appreciate that comment, and I would agree with you. But like anything, we prioritize our equipment and try to make a best determination we can what is absolutely critical equipment, and we budget for that for the year coming. It's the other things that are maybe not as critical that we think we can put off a year, that's really what we're talking about. We are very aware that our treatment plants are a public health and safety facility, and we cannot operate without them. And therefore, the most critical equipment, we have to have backups, and we have to account for that. Good answer.
Well, thank you, Chip. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
That's all I had.
Thanks, John. You want to ask if there's any other public comment?
Is there anybody else? Is there anybody else who would like a comment on this item at the moment? We don't see any hands raised, so if you'd like to make a comment, *9 or raise your hand on your computer. Okay. Well, with that, I think we can close this meeting, and we'll be meeting again in 2 weeks' time. Danette will reach out to you for the best time for the two of you, and then that will be posted as a meeting, but look for it in 2 weeks' time.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Thanks, Beck.
Very
Great.
productive day.
Thank you. All right.